Well, the bell is rung, which means we have a couple more minutes before we start class. So, just however you... Okay, I don't hear any activity outside. So let's bow and have a word of prayer. Begin. Our holy, righteous, divine Father, hallowed, great is your name. You're the only true and living God, creator of heaven and earth. And you alone are the one we look to for life eternal. We pray that you will forgive us as we approach you of all of our sins. We pray that you will purge us through your Son, and you will hear us as your children. We thank you for this day, which is your day. We are grateful, we are blessed, we are privileged to have this day to worship you, to sing and pray, and to be reminded of what you have done for us. We ask, Father, your patience, your love and care, and your acceptance of our worship, that it will be pleasing to you. As we open your word and read it now, Father, we are thankful for the opportunity to do so, for the power of your word through your providence, having kept it and preserved it through all these generations so that we can read it and know it and understand and see the way to life itself. We ask that you will be patient with us and help us as we lead our lives, our children and children's children. Help them. We pray that you will be patient with us when we are weak, and we ask that you will help us to always walk with you. Through Christ we pray. Amen. Okay, this morning we're going to begin the new book of 2 Samuel, but as for those of you who have already read on ahead and seen, this is just really a continuation of the narrative that we have been reading in 1 Samuel, and as we had noted Wednesday night, 1 Samuel is dealing with the reign of Saul. 2 Samuel now will begin with the reign of David, having ended the first book of Samuel with the death of Saul. And it's just going to pick up right there from looking at the events historically. Here is what is recorded for us here. Verse 1 of 2 Samuel, chapter 1. It came to pass after the death of Saul, when David had returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had stayed 2 days in Ziklag. You remember, while the Philistines were fighting Saul, David had been fighting the Amalekites, and he had gone back to Ziklag. He had been excused from this war against Saul and the Israelites. So he comes back there, and on the third day, verse 2, it says, behold, it happened that a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. So it was when he came to David that he fell to the ground and prostrated himself. Who falls to the ground and prostrates themselves? Prostrate means face in the dirt. Who does that, and why do they do that?
The lesser person does it.
Excuse me?
The lesser person does it.
The lesser person does that, and who would he do that to? In such an expression, the idea is that here, even this Amalekite knows that David is the king. That the idea of when David was anointed earlier by Samuel, it was not done in secret. It was told to Saul, told to Jonathan. Everyone knew that David would be the next king. And interestingly, even the enemies of Israel knew that David would be the next king. Now, I don't know if this is what would embolden them to fight further against Saul, and why, as we ended 1 Samuel Wednesday night, when it said that the Philistines pressed the battle hard against Saul and his sons. They were victorious over the Israelites. They were winning that battle, but they picked out Saul, and they're going hard after him. It may be that they are emboldened to do so because they know, as many other of the nations, Saul's days are numbered, and he is not going to remain as king. And if that is the case, it would make sense that this young Amalekite would fall before David. He knows that David is the leader of these men, and he knows these men have been victorious over both the Philistines and the Amalekites. But there is that small part of which he knows that David will become the king. Be that as it may. Verse 3, David said to him, "Where have you come from?" He said to him, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." And David said to him, "How did the matter go? Please tell me." Now, they don't have internet. They don't have social media. They just get word of mouth. This has just happened, and David is anxious to know exactly what has happened here with Saul and with Jonathan. He said, "Please tell me." And he answered, "Well, the people have fled from the battle. Many of the people are fallen and dead, and Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead also." And David said to the young man who told him, "How do you know that Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead?" He wants proof. The young man who told him said, "Well, as I happened by chance to be on Mount Gilboa, there was Saul leaning on his spear, and indeed the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him." Now, this young man is saying, just by happen chance, I was strolling around and I'm on the side of Mount Gilboa. Well, this battle is between the Philistines and the Israelites here, and he's going here, as they're fighting here, and the Amalekites. I've got that backwards, excuse me. He said, "I just happened to be there, and I see Saul and Jonathan, and well, it is the Philistines, isn't it? Or is it the Amalekites? Are they getting mixed up in here?" Now, I want you to see something here. You remember what I said about the Amalekites Wednesday night? You know, I just think of the word weasel. Pardon me, I don't mean to be unkind or anything, but historically, this is exactly where they fit. And this young man is going to fit that. He has no business on that mountain, but he's there. And how would he be able to pick out Saul and Jonathan? He said, "How do you know that they're dead?" Verse 6, the young man said, "Well, as I happened by chance to be on Mount Gilboa, there was Saul leaning on his spear." Now, the end of 1 Samuel, he's leaning on his spear. What is he wanting to do? Take his life. He asked his armor bearer to take his life. And this fella says, "Well, I just happened," and there he was leaning on his spear, and he's going to take his life. And indeed, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. Now, when he looked behind him, he saw me, and he called to me. I answered, "Here I am." And he said, "Who are you?" I answered him, "I am an Amalekite." Saul says, "Well, what are you doing here?" You don't have any dog in this fight, as we say in the South or in other places today. Verse 9, he said to him, "Please stand over me and kill me, for anguish has come upon me, but my life still remains in me." So I stood over him and killed him, because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and the bracelet that was on his arm, and I brought them here to my Lord. Now, does that fit with what we read Wednesday night? No. Wednesday night, the end of 1 Samuel, yes, he sees the battle as lost. He wants to take his life. He asks his armor bearer to kill him, and he says, "I can't do it." So Saul fell on his own sword. And when the armor bearer saw that, he too fell on his own sword. They both committed suicide there. Well, what's this Amalekite? Why is he lying about this? What do you think is going on here? The plots are really starting to get thick here in what is happening on this. Why would he say such a thing?
He's hoping for a reward.
Right. He's thinking like an Amalekite, those people who prey upon the weak and have no scruple or principles of any kind of integrity, thinking that, well, if David were like one of us, he would be thrilled to hear that Saul, his enemy, has died. And if I can tell him not only that he died, but that I kind of helped him out there, I helped you out, probably get a reward. They're liars. They're weasel. They are unprincipled people that could not be trusted. That's the Amalekite. Next time you read or study about the Amalekites, just think of people like that. Unprincipled, deceitful, cowardly weakling. They just, so this is going to help us understand maybe David's reaction to this. And then the next thought that comes, how did he get Saul's crown and bracelet? Well, yeah, he obviously would stole it, going through the spoils. We had read that after the battle, Philistines were going through the spoils. But he's not a Philistine. He's an Amalekite. What's he doing there? Everything about this just says just what an underhanded, pardon me, I just can't keep saying the word weasel. Just weasels around, waits for an opportunity, and pounces on any opportunity to exploit the weak, the dead, the fallen, the disadvantaged, things like that. Lawyers come to my mind. Not all lawyers. Where I preached in Birmingham, we had 7 attorneys. And I was so proud that in 8 years, never was I subpoenaed for anything. Well, I take that back. One time I was subpoenaed, but it wasn't about me. It was about somebody else out there. Never got a lawsuit. The idea here is that this individual is looking for an opportunity to exploit and prey upon the weak. And this is what he is doing. David recognizes that. And so in verse 13, then David took hold of his own clothes, tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. I bet that really startled this young Amalekite. He's expecting, oh, thank you, oh, good news, happy days are here now. We got ready. He's expecting that, and then when he sees David and all of his men with him tear their clothes, and then they begin to mourn, verse 12, and they weep and were fasting, it's caught this young Amalekite by surprise. He didn't expect this kind of reaction. And so the people fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan his son, for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Now think about this, that this is the first big defeat for Israel. What we have read so far throughout 1 Samuel is victory. Victory through David, victory through Jonathan, victory through Saul. But now as the story progresses and we get to the end of 1 Samuel, it ends in defeat. And they're not sure how to take this. And they're weeping. We hear about people in professional sports when they lose the championship game, grown men crying because they've lost this. Here, these men are crying because they've lost their own brothers and their sisters in this. People have died, they've lost. And now the name of the Lord has been shamed. Reproach has been brought upon it by what has happened here. And so verse 13, David said to the young man who told him, "Where are you from?" He said, "I am the son of an alien, an Amalekite." Wow. Took some nerve, I think, to tell him that. David said, how was it you were with not afraid, and you put forth your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Now, he doesn't know the history of when David had 2 opportunities to kill Saul, and he responded to his men by saying, I would never raise my hand against the anointed of God. So it may be that this Amalekite who is ignorant of these previous events that happened here in the cave, etc., with Saul, he's hearing this for the first time. He said, how was it that you weren't afraid to raise your hand against the Lord's anointed. Now, let's stop here for a moment. Let's talk about this. Let's analyze this. Let's put ourselves back in this ancient world where there are scores and scores in the immediate area of areas that would fight against each other. You may remember we had mentioned when we were talking about Achish, the king of Gath, that it was very common that major cities had their own king. They would have their own army. Yes, they would be part of a greater nation, and oftentimes would be called together. The Philistines had 5 cities that they were the major cities. Each one had its own king, and when they would fight against another nation, they would all come together in a confederation of war to fight against them. But individually, they each had their own leader and king. So, kings would come, kings would go. If a king was killed in a battle, another came to replace him. In their thinking, in their world, it was not that big of a deal unless it was your husband, your son, or something immediate family. It was not that big of a deal that the king of Gath or the king of any city would die. But here David is making a very distinct difference. This king is not just any king, it's the king that was anointed by God. It was the king that was not chosen in a popular vote, but a king that was anointed by God. How could you do that without being afraid? Now, stop here for a moment, and we can fast forward. Have you ever wondered to yourself how on earth the king, the royal families, let's put it this way, in Europe developed through the centuries, and how a cousin of France could marry a cousin of Germany and become the leader of England or Luxembourg or something of that nature, that they were all interrelated, and then we know maybe even furthermore as they became inbred, the health issues, the hemophilia, etc., that resulted in their family lineage. Why did people do that? Why did they allow that? Why was that something that was evident from nation to nation to nation everywhere? Josh?
To keep the wealth of the family.
Well, no, that's not it. They would keep the wealth, but how is it that the common man would allow that? Would accept that? Would approve of that?
No elections.
Well, they did in France. Well, here's the deal, and it'll come back to what we're talking about right here. The kings, as perverted and diluted as it would become through the centuries, the royal families always appeal to divine anointment. The prince becomes the king because he is blood related to the king who has just died, who himself was appointed by God. They are all divinely appointed people. And that if you kind of keep that in the back of your mind in future when you're reading stories or watching documentaries about the kingdoms through the ancient years, etc., that's how their leaders came to be. And that's why the kings were so they were so anxious to have a male heir, because it has to stay in the family. It really didn't have much to do with the wealth as much as it did. We're going to hold on to this power because this power has been given to us by God. And so when all of the masses, as ignorant as they were about this, all were told and understood and accepted the idea that, well, this is God's choice. We can't fight against them. As reprehensible as they may be and as foolish or destructive as they could be for the nations. In the ancient time, that's how those people stayed in power, because It was part of the lineage, and the lineage was traced all the way back to God. As crazy as that is, I mention that because this is what David is appealing to. God chose Saul. The other kings were just put in place by force. How is it that you would not raise your hand, that you would raise your hand against the anointed of God? This is what David has now said several times in this story so far, is that you can't do that. God chose him. In essence, it was saying, God put him there, God will take him away. As Nebuchadnezzar learned, God would raise up and God would abase. It's God who was in charge and who would choose and who would change these peoples. And so that thought, to me, has always been extraordinary. It has been a constant thought through the ancient world. And this Amalekite, who is from a very unprincipled group of people, he doesn't. They just, do what you can while you can. If no one's looking, steal it, take it. There was a well-meaning brother who was trying to help Dewey and I understand the Russian culture before we went there, and we learned later that that might be true in some cases, but not always. His view was that the Russians believed that if they could steal something from you, you don't deserve to keep it. If you couldn't protect it or guard it, they had the moral right to take it because you were smarter than they were. Well, fortunately, that was not the case with many of them, those that became Christians. But there was that attitude. And I think of that when I think of the Amalekites. If look, no one's seeing, I'll take it. And if I can take it from you, it's your fault, not mine, because you didn't protect it. You weren't smart enough to watch it. Keith, I'm sorry.
That's interesting, what you just said. So I've always been interested about these couple verses because I wondered your explanation here about the anointed of God. The reaction of David's men when recently didn't they encourage him to kill Saul? And yet, so I wondered their reaction here because David reacted first and they followed suit, and by his example, or did they begin to get into grief and tear their clothes immediately because of David's example and how he had held Saul in a position in high regard?
Well, I think it would be akin to the question that Donna asked Wednesday night about how later they were described as David's mighty men. Through those times, those months and years, their character began to change. They went from the worthless to the men of worth. They were unprincipled, now they're principled. And I think that likely is the reason for that. They've seen by example, of course. There's no greater man to follow than David militarily. He would be the quintessential leader and commander of God's people, and they learned from following him. And I think,
A great example for us today.
yeah.
I was hoping you would say that. I kind of thought that our example, when it seems through years, futile at times, that how important it is for us to maintain our integrity and our respect and honor to others.
That's right. And I've said this a couple of times in this last month, and I'm going to say it again. I feel compelled because the clock is ticking on me here. I just have a few more times in this podium. And when a moment comes up with a discussion like that, it would be, I think, irresponsible for me to just forget it and pass on. Let me stop and make this 90-second sermon here on to this principle. Young men, wherever they're at, and whatever the culture, they are all looking for leaders. They're all looking for an example. Even if it's within their own peers, they're looking for someone to follow. And if they follow the wrong person, of course, they learn the wrong customs and traits, and it becomes disastrous in their later life. But those young men who are fortunate enough to have an example before them, a father, a grandfather, a big brother, or maybe, as we had mentioned Wednesday night, in the military of someone. Sometimes it's a coach. When boys just don't have much discipline, but a coach gives them the discipline. They look up to that, and this is a common story. They come out of 3 or 4 years of playing for this. They now understand the parts of life. So many ball players that, at least in the South, that they were everywhere. They all said the same thing, is that this coach helped me become a man. And they're looking for examples like that. David would be the gold standard of someone to follow militarily, as a child of God, to be the kind of man, and I think that's what we're seeing right here, where they are now becoming even more and more loyal to the Lord, and they're becoming men of principle. Doesn't mean they're perfect, and they're going to make some big mistakes down the line, but they need that guidance. They need that example. That's why it is so imperative. Faces start rushing to my mind here about all these people, these young mothers whose husbands have left them, and they've got these young boys. They don't know what to do with them, and these boys are lost, and they're just going to follow whatever and whoever. And their grandfathers, who are faithful Christians, are desperate to try to help their grandsons before the mold is set. It's just a common story, and this is what's going on right here, I believe. Yes, Barry.
The other side of that, or another facet to that, is in the heat of battle and war. You're taught to hate your enemy. You're taught to.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter if it's the king, the general, or the peon carrying his armor. They're on the other side. And David gives Saul the intrinsic value that God has given him as the king. And the principle of that is carried into the New Testament in many, many ways. We smite you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. Forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. There's so many times when Christ or his apostles have exemplified that. Yes, we're fighting Satan, but we're not fighting this person.
Right. We're fighting sin. We're not fighting the sinner. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So that's just the reality of life. And then when fathers were home, the homes were stronger. Okay, that's all we'll say about that here right now. Any other question or comment, thought about? All right, so David incredulously asked this young Amalekite, "You mean you weren't afraid to put your hand forth to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Verse 15, pardon me. Then David called one of the young men and said, "Go near and execute him." And he struck him so that he died. It was just that simple and quick. Really? All right, you go kill him. And he's dead. I'm sure this guy, but wait. Look, I brought you the crown. No, he so terribly miscalculated what David would want and need and what he would accept. And David said in verse 16, "Your blood is on your own head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed." No, that was a lie. I didn't kill. Saul killed himself. I was just there. No, too late. By your own mouth, you have already testified that you killed Saul. So if he did tell a lie, how is he going to back out of this and turn that around? He can't. I think that's what happened here. And so by his own words, he has condemned himself. And David says, now, because you said it, this is what's going to happen to you. What an object lesson to the rest of David's men. Verse 17, David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan, his son. And he told them to teach the children of Judah the song of the bow. Interesting here. Indeed, it is written in the book of Jasher. And here is the song. David has, I don't think this was his first song, but it is interesting to note through history, not just religious history, but just through poetic history, history of literature, etc., that quite often the poems, the sonnets, the songs that have been written that become classic are those that are prompted by a deep, devastating loss or hurt or heartbreak, even up to modern times. Those are the songs that, for whatever reason, captures people, captures their imagination, certainly gets their attention, and it makes them think of maybe those moments in their own lives. However it be, this is a traumatic moment in David's life, and he writes this song. The beauty of Israel is slain on your high places. Now, Saul was head and shoulders above every man. Physically, we are told at the beginning of 1 Samuel, he was a very handsome man and well to look upon. He was a delight to people's eyes. But do you think this is all that David means in this opening statement, the beauty of Israel? He won the Mr. Israel contest because he was so handsome. No, the beauty of Israel here now is describing the greatness of the kingdom as it is personified in this man, that God is leading these people and has chosen this man. So as he has said repeatedly, this is the Lord's anointed. We didn't have a contest. God said, this is the man. And Samuel anointed him. And at the beginning, we were all very thrilled. He was a good king, and he was intelligent militarily. Before everything went south, he was the beauty of Israel, and he's slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. That's probably the most famous statement that he has ever written next to the Lord is my shepherd. Tell it not in Gath. Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. These are Philistia. Gath is the home of Goliath. Ashkelon is one of the 5 cities of Philistia. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice. Lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. Don't tell our enemies, because they're just going to have a celebration with this. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, nor let be rain upon you. This is a curse that he's bringing upon this mount in a very figurative way. We showed pictures Wednesday night in the winter when there's moisture that it was green, but in the summer it's brown. There's not a lot of water around there. But this is a curse on Mount Gilboa that's more than just physical. It is a figurative metaphor for this mountain is remembered not for anything good, but for something that was just horrible. Like the place in South Dakota where Custer's Last Stand, the river in that valley there, it's known not for famous, but for infamous event that happened there at that place. And they don't let anyone forget. Verse 21, O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, nor let there be rain upon you, nor fields of offerings, for the shield of the mighty is cast away there. The shield of Saul, not anointed with oil, for the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. That is, they were defeated there, they fell, but the bow and the sword returned. This is saying is that the crown, the bracelet, the spear, the bow, they would be recovered. And in a figurative sense, they're going to continue. The fall of Saul was not the end of the kingdom of Israel. This was simply the first phase. Saul would be killed. David would come take his place. And David is saying, this is not going to stay. Saul and Jonathan, verse 23. Boy, I can't see that. Yeah, 25. It is 3, yeah. Saul and Jonathan were beloved and pleasant in their lives and in their death. What? They were pleasant. I didn't know that David would consider Saul being pleasant. But he says, and in their death, they were not divided. They were together. This is, as we have said, as a tribute to Jonathan, he would not leave his father's side. There was still that family connection, that love, that they were beloved. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Yeah, in their heyday. But every eagle and every lion dies. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet with luxury, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan was slain in your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was wonderful, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war perished. Now, the statement that probably jumps off the page that you sit there and scratch your head and wonder about is the love between Jonathan and David. And the critics, of course, jump on this and say that they were lovers. That obviously is just absurd. But what he's speaking of is an affection and a love for another man who has been in a time or a moment of powerful crisis that no one else could take their place. Two men who save each other on the battlefield in war, wherever that war is. They survive, they come home, they get married, they raise families. Of course, they love their family, their wives, their children. But there is a love for their companion, the love for their partner, their co-soldier that saved their lives, that is in another realm altogether. As surely we all know that love is not a monolithic picture. There are so many variations of love and different degrees, different types. That all come from God. This is what David, I believe, is describing. This love that he had with Jonathan that transcended any love that either one of them would have for a woman. Their love for each other is that they did for each other what others could not. Some would not, others could not. And so this is just describing a degree of affection that he has that he carried with him the rest of his life. And we know later on that the covenant they had to save each other, he would protect Jonathan's descendants while David was alive. So this is what he's saying. Was someone say something here? Okay. Any question or comment or thought about this statement? You know, it's an understatement to say that David was eloquent. He was so talented in so many ways. This is one of them. He was articulate in being able to describe and to teach, to say, to write those things that are held even today. 3,000 or 4,000 years later, we're still reading it, still understand it. The Lord's is my shepherd is repeated to this day and will continue to be repeated in some dramatic classes. In some places, actors and actresses are put on the stage and told to quote Psalm 23 with the most emotion, how they would interpret. It's called oral interpretation. These are classics. They just don't go away. So he was articulate to a degree that we don't fully understand. But after this happens, when he executes this Amalekite, expresses his love for Saul and Jonathan, so that no one, and here's the other advantage to this, or advantage, that's not the right word. Here's another consequence to this event that we're reading here, is that very few, if any, people in the kingdom of Israel would quietly say in the corner of their house, well, David was sure happy once Saul got out of the way, because we knew about Saul. And, he tried to kill David a couple of times. And he tried to kill his own son, Jonathan. And, Saul wasn't really a warm person. And nobody really trusted Saul. And we knew Saul was after David, and David showed such a patience and tolerance for Saul's murderous rage, and et cetera. So they might be thinking, well, David must be happy. David is saying, none of this. None of that. Saul was God's anointed, and he's devastated. He's heartbroken that not just Jonathan, but that Saul was killed too. So this would help in the future reign of David, because if you'll just think about this, we're not trying to get too hypothetical and trying to add more to the story than there is recorded, but just using human nature as the example. Had people in the kingdom thought that David was privately giddy that Saul is dead, what do you think could happen? Those who were loyal to Saul would resent it. They would keep it to themselves. And when the opportunity would present itself, there might have been a rebellion against David. Any of the loyalists to Saul would take that as, well, this is not, David's not the man. Bob?
Like the word you use, giddy, if people really thought that, it's sad because David had many opportunities to put him to death and
Right.
take over, and he didn't. His deep love for God is what came forth, and all of this is what I get.
Right.
And that you can't, that's not David, that's David being loving God with all his heart and soul.
That's right, and that brings up the real sermon here. And we just preach it, is that's what unifies the people then and now, is not the personal agenda or whatever personal gain or loss that would come to David, but when the people recognized universally his love for God, a man after God's own heart, that's what unified the people. That's why there was no rebellion later on Saul's behalf. Now, there would be a rebellion against David. It would come from his own sons. The most devastating thing that would happen. David's life was tragic. Just tragic. But here, at this moment, he's using the intuitive insight, the wisdom, to show people that he is not happy about losing Saul. That Saul is God's anointed, and he is weeping and demonstrating his grief to all the people so that all would be unified in their grief towards Saul and Jonathan. And then likewise, all would be unified in their support and love for David. That's why the very next chapter, David will be finally crowned the king of Israel. And so looking at these events from these battles, and as Saul dies, and now David is going to be anointed, this little interim in between where this Amalekite thinks he can profit from this moment, exploit the situation, misjudged terribly what David would do. That was a demonstrative consequence to the rest of the people of Israel. Okay, let me read just the first couple of verses here, and that'll get us set for Wednesday night here. Chapter 2, verse 1. It happened after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah? Now, why would he ask that? He's been a year and a half in Ziklag. He has been, in the minds of some Israelites, fighting against the Israelites. He's been an enemy of sorts. He wasn't there when they fought against the Philistines. Maybe he was aligned with the Philistines in one way. All of these things that we talked about where the rumors could start about David. David now knows that, that's one, right? Okay, good. David knows that this isn't going to happen quickly. This is going to be a long, drawn-out affair to be able to reconcile and get Israel back together, because they have been factionalized. They've been broken up. And so he asked the Lord, shall I go up there, or is this not a good time to do that? The Lord said to him, go up. David said, where shall I go up? And he said, to Hebron. So there are many places that he could have gone. Which would be the most strategic and the most consequential? And God tells him, go to Hebron. So David went up there, and his two wives also, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. And David brought up the men who were with him, every man with his household. So they dwell in the cities of Hebron. Then the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, the men of Jabesh Gilead were the ones who buried Saul. So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, you are blessed of the Lord, for you have shown this kindness to your Lord, to Saul, and have buried him. And now may the Lord show kindness and truth to you. I also will repay you this kindness, because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strengthened, and be valiant. For your master Saul is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. He is mending fences. He's coming in, now he's beginning to get these people to reconcile with him and with each other. And when he finds out that the men of Jabesh Gilead were the ones who rescued Saul and Jonathan's bodies from the wall of Bethshan when they had hung them up there, he said, you are blessed among the people of Judah. Everything is on a positive note. Everything's positive. Everything is now meant to now rebuild. There's been a lot of war. There's been a lot of personal attacks. There have been a lot of factions, and with that come countless rumors and factions within the people, especially as they are scattered out over the land of Judea. David wants to pull them all together here. Let's get on the same page. And so he blesses them. And what do? The house got together and they anointed him king over them. So now he doesn't take it, they give it. Very important. Very important in this. And so David is able to reconcile this. But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, and made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, over Benjamin, and over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. Only the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. It's not going to be a fairy tale ending. You know, we think of the kingdom being divided after Solomon died. It actually was first divided when David was anointed king, because Abner is jealous. He's angry. And he is not going to let little David become the king of Judah. We'll pick up there Wednesday night. Thank you. Hey, Josh. How you doing, man? Hey, Gene. How are you doing? Good, 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 good. All right. Dewey fed me breakfast this morning. I'm just thrilled. Mama, okay? Okay, good. Yeah, yeah. We're making it. We're making it through there. All right. Yeah. Everybody good? Everybody good? How you feeling, Steph? I'm sorry. I know you're tired of people asking you that. Okay. Because if you want, I'll stop asking. Good. Good. Wonderful. Yeah, sure. We're all impatient. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I understand. I understand. Well, good. I'm glad things are moving in the right direction. That's good. Hey, Carla. How you, sweetheart? Oh, good to see you. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you've gotten everything out of the office that's yours, you're like done with whatever's in the office?
Not yet.
Still have some?
Yeah, still have some. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
When do you think you'll have that out?
Oh, probably this next week. Yeah, yeah. You need some stuff in there?
No, I don't need any, I was just gonna clean it up, straighten
Yeah,
it up.
yeah, okay.
Clean out the
Yeah.
desk, you know, make sure.
Right,
So I did-
right.
But I didn't wanna, I wanna get in there.
Yeah,
and
sure,
go,
sure.
"Oh,
No, no,
sure."
no problem, no problem. Yeah, I've got a few more that I'm gonna do, and I've got some stuff at the house that I'm gonna bring back here.
Okay.
So I've got some bookshelves and some books to put in
Okay.
for these that I'm gonna leave here.
Okay.
And I'll, by this time next week, I should be done.
Okay. I won't be here next Sunday.
Okay, that's right. That's right. Okay. Well, we'll, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, before I leave, it'll be, that's, no problem. No problem. No problem.